Welcome to r/Silver Crow Azula. I'm Silver Crow, your curious guide, and I'm really looking forward to exploring some pretty fascinating and maybe surprising stuff with you today.
And I'm Azula Crow. I'm here to help connect the dots, maybe add some deeper insights. So today our focus is really unpacking the, let's say, intricate world of sugar relationships. We're going to zoom in on a term you've probably seen floating around online, Splenda Daddy.
Right.
And we're going to pull out what we think are the crucial insights from a whole bunch of sources you gave us. We've got Reddit threads, some legal analysis, all sorts of things. The goal is really to help you get a better handle on the dynamics, the expectations, and yeah, those often conflicting financial and social angles of these kinds of modern arrangements.
Absolutely. And it's not just about like dictionary definitions, is it? It's about really understanding what these relationships actually involve, why people get into them in the first place. Yeah. And maybe most surprisingly, these really complex questions around how they're viewed, especially when taxes come into the picture. It's way more nuanced than it looks on the surface.
It really, really is. So, okay, let's start with the terms themselves. Splenda Daddy. It's a phrase that's, well, it's become pretty common in online communities, hasn't it? And right away, it kind of tells you something about the money situation.
It does. Mm-hmm. And I find that fascinating because it immediately suggests like a hierarchy, right? A spectrum within this bigger category of sugar daddy relationships. Mm-hmm. So what exactly is the difference? What makes someone a Splenda Daddy versus, the other types?
Okay, so think of it like this. The Splenda Daddy is generally seen as being at the lower end of that financial spectrum. They can provide cash, they can give gifts, but their income has, let's say, noticeable limitations. Mm. It might be more like just enough or comfortable rather than, totally extravagant. And that's the contrast with a traditional sugar daddy who usually has a specific, often higher budget set aside for an allowance.
Right.
Or going even further, you have the honey daddy. These are the ones with basically no financial limits, offering really over-the-top gifts without even blinking.
So it's not just if they have money, but how much and how it actually shapes the kind of lifestyle or support being offered. Yeah. And what really jumped out from the sources, for me anyway, was how relative that term Splenda can be. Right. Like what Splenda to one person might actually feel like sugar to someone else.
Exactly. That's a key point. We saw examples, on Reddit, people talking about this. Users who either call themselves Splenda or get labeled that way. And their dates, the examples given were things like going to chain restaurants, maybe miniature golf, bowling, that kind of thing.
Not exactly five-star hotels or spontaneous trips to Paris.
Right. It's a different level of experience compared to what you might imagine with say, honey daddy. It suggests a more modest, maybe more down-to-earth kind of support.
And it's not always just about the dates either, is it? Some of the discussions mentioned Splenda Daddies might cover other things, maybe more practical things, like helping with housing or even child-related costs.
That's true. Or sometimes they just personally prefer a more modest lifestyle themselves, And that can still be a really good match for certain sugar babies who aren't necessarily looking for extreme luxury. Mm. It really just highlights that the label, the definition, it often depends on who you ask, right? Mm. Or specifically the person receiving the support. It boils down to what both people are looking for and what they agree on.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So let's get into the why. Why do people actually enter these arrangements? What are the main drivers, the motivations for both sides?
Well, for sugar babies, the sources are pretty clear. The motivation is overwhelmingly financial. Students are a huge part of this demographic. You see so many struggling with tuition fees, student loan debt. It's immense.
Right.
The data we looked at suggested the average sugar baby is about 25 years old, receiving something like $2,800 a month. And get this, a massive 62% of hopeful sugar babies are students.
Wow. 62%.
Yeah. There are even mentions of things like sugar baby university programs offering free premium site memberships to students. Yeah. It really shines a light on that huge student debt issue, particularly for women who apparently hold about 64% of all student loan debt in the U.S.
That's a really powerful statistic, isn't it? 62% students. It suggests for a huge chunk of them, this isn't just about getting extra spending money. It's potentially about basic financial survival, or at least easing some serious economic pressure.
Definitely.
But okay, while money is clearly the big one, the sources also hinted it's not always just about the cash. There's this other element, companionship.
You're right. While the financial benefit is usually primary, a majority also say they are looking for companionship. So it's not purely transactional for everybody involved. There's often still a desire for some kind of human connection there.
Okay, so flipping that coin. What about the sugar daddies? What are their motivations?
Yeah.
Beyond, the obvious assumptions. There was one quote in the material from a sugar daddy that was particularly revealing.
Ah, yes, I remember that one. He was quite candid. He said his main gain was an ego high.
Right.
He described finding pleasure in making a young, attractive woman orgasm and feel good physically and emotionally. And he directly linked that feeling to, quote, mending old wounds from high school.
Wow.
Yeah. It's fascinating, isn't it, how it points to this deeper psychological gratification, maybe something beyond just the physical side of things. And another point often mentioned is the desire for discretion. Many prefer meeting indoors, maintaining privacy.
And the structure of these arrangements seems really key. They're usually quite defined based on terms agreed upon up front. And there's this whole vocabulary that goes with it.
Absolutely. It often starts with what they call a meet and greet, or M&G.
M&G, right?
Yeah. These are usually the first dates, typically kept platonic.
Yeah.
Maybe a small gift is exchanged, maybe not. It's a chance to feel each other out. Then, if both sides feel there's potential, they move on to actually discussing and setting the terms. How often they'll meet, what the financial side will look like. Is it per meeting? Is it a regular allowance?
And that vocabulary is so specific. You hear terms like PPM, pay per meet.
Exactly. A set amount for each date, often used at the beginning before maybe shifting to a regular allowance.
Then there are experienced daddies, the ones who provide gifts, dinners, maybe trips, but not actual cash.
Right. And you also hear warnings about salt daddies.
Ah, yes. The fakes.
Kind of.
Yeah.
They pretend to be interested in sugaring, but then try to negotiate way down or even get companionship for free.
In rinsing, that sounds not good.
No, it refers to when a sugar baby accepts payment, but then doesn't follow through on the agreed upon intimacy aspect of the arrangement. And that brings us to a really central point. The direct link, often, between the payment and the intimacy. There's even explicit advice you see in these forums like, never initiate any intimacy with a sugar daddy unless you've already received your sugar.
So payment first.
Often, yes. It's presented as a safeguard.
Yeah.
A way to protect against situations where someone might claim they want a long-term thing, get intimate, and then just disappear. It really shows the kind of calculated risk management involved.
Okay, so this is where, for me, it gets really interesting and, frankly, pretty complicated. All this discussion about money, gifts, allowances, services, it leads directly into the tangled world of taxes.
Oh, yeah.
Because the huge disagreement, especially in the online spaces discussing this, seems to be, are these payments from a sugar daddy taxable income for the sugar baby, or are they tax-free gifts? And this isn't just like a theoretical legal question. It has real-world impact.
It creates this massive gray area. And the dominant story, the narrative you see most often coming from sugar baby forums and communities, is that the payments are gifts.
Right. Gifts, therefore not income, therefore not taxable to the person receiving them.
Exactly. And they often bring up that common piece of advice, which can be a bit misleading, that the giver pays the gift tax. Then they'll also point to the very high lifetime gift tax exemption. I think it was, over $13 million in 2024?
Yeah, $13,610,000.
Right. So the argument goes most sugar daddies are nowhere near hitting that limit, meaning they wouldn't actually owe any gift tax anyway.
And didn't some sources mention specific exclusions too? Like if the money goes directly to pay tuition or medical bills, that's definitely not a taxable gift for the giver.
Correct. Direct payments for tuition or medical expenses have specific exclusions in the gift tax rules, which, kind of muddies the water even more if the support takes that form.
But then there's the other side, the counter argument, often coming from tax pros or maybe more cautious sugar babies.
Yes. The income argument. They basically say, look, compensation for services is taxable income. Full stop. It's that classic, if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck analogy. If these payments look and feel like compensation for the companionship, the time, the intimacy provided, then legally it probably is income. Tax professionals apparently suggest using a facts and circumstances test. They'd look at things like, how did the two people meet? Was it through a specific platform designed for these arrangements? How many such relationships does the sugar baby have? How long did it last? All these details could point towards income rather than a gift.
And what's really illuminating here, I think, for you listening, is how these real-life arrangements just completely blur lines that, our tax system and maybe society generally likes to keep neat and tidy.
Totally.
It really exposes how tricky it is to define work or compensation when you step outside traditional employment, especially into more intimate or personal arrangements.
And all this ambiguity, this uncertainty, it logically leads to a lot of anxiety and concern for sugar babies about taxes and compliance. They worry about reporting income, especially if they're getting regular deposits into their bank accounts. They worry about audits if they can't show a clear, legitimate source for that money.
I remember reading about a big spike in anxiety around, was it 2021? Something about a change in rules for payment apps like PayPal and Venmo.
Yes, that caused a huge stir. There was a new law set to take effect that would require these platforms to report transactions totaling over just $600 in a year to the IRS via a 1099-K form.
Only $600.
Yeah. Now, the IRS ended up delaying the implementation of that low threshold multiple times, and the current plan for 2024 onwards, I believe, has raised it significantly, back up to $5,000 in most cases for the reporting trigger. But that initial $600 announcement definitely caused panic in the community. It reportedly pushed a lot of arrangements towards cash only to avoid that digital trail. It just shows how sensitive people are to potential IRS scrutiny.
And there's another layer of fear too, right? This misconception that if they did declare the money as income, they might somehow be labeled as like escorts or sex workers and face criminal charges.
Exactly. And it's really crucial to clarify that point. From a purely tax perspective, failing to report income, even income earned from illegal activities, is itself a crime. Income from prostitution, for example, is legally taxable in the U.S. The tax obligation is separate from the legality of how the money was earned. Declaring income doesn't automatically trigger criminal charges for the underlying activity, though it doesn't grant immunity either.
That's a critical distinction, one that seems to get lost in a lot of the online chatter, leading to maybe unnecessary fear about the tax side itself.
Absolutely. It's not about legitimizing anything. It's about the universal requirement to report income, whatever its source.
And some of these discussions even ventured into territory like treating sugaring as an actual business. I saw mentions on Reddit about people asking if they could be put on payroll at their Sugar Daddies company, like getting a W-2, or maybe a 1099 as an independent contractor. That sounds incredibly risky.
Oh, massively risky, and rightly so. One source, described as a sugar mentor on Reddit, explicitly warned against this, pointing out that paying personal expenses, which is essentially what an allowance is through a business, is straight up fraud.
Right. Huge red flag for the business owner if they get audited.
Huge. And potentially for the sugar baby, too, if they're knowingly part of that arrangement.
What about the idea of classifying the sugar baby as a household employee, like a nanny or housekeeper? Does that fly for tax purposes?
Almost certainly not. For someone to qualify as a household employee, their work needs to be of a household nature. Think cleaning, cooking, childcare, gardening. Providing companionship or intimacy, even if it happens in the home, doesn't fit that IRS definition.
Okay, so if the payments are treated as income and they're not an employee or a household employee, what's the most likely classification suggested by tax advisors in the sources?
The most common suggestion, if treating it as income, is for the sugar baby to operate as a sole proprietor, basically self-employed.
And what does that mean practically, taxes-wise?
It means they'd be responsible for paying self-employment taxes on their net earnings from sugaring. That covers both the employee and employer portions of Social Security and Medicare. It's currently a combined rate of 15.3%.
15.3%. Ouch.
Yeah, it's significant.
And under that model, as a sole proprietor, could there actually be legitimate business deductions? I think I saw mentions of things like phone lines used for contacting sugar daddies, maybe costs for photos, even costumes and props.
That's right. The discussion does go there. It really illustrates how some are attempting to, professionalize the financial aspect, trying to fit these arrangements into the existing tax framework, even if it feels a bit awkward. That shift from thinking it's just a gift to maybe this is a business is quite a significant one we see happening.
Okay, so let's zoom out a bit from the nitty-gritty of tax forms.
Yeah.
What is all this back and forth, this ambiguity around taxes and gifts? Tell us about broader social issues, specifically the stigma around sex work.
Oh, it tells us a lot. That whole gift narrative, the one that's so common among sugar babies, it serves a really important function. It helps create distance from the stigma associated with sex work. One source described it perfectly as creating a pseudo-innocuous veneer. It makes sugaring seem less like a transaction and more like just a minor twist on a traditional romantic relationship. And you could argue this actually helps maintain the supply of sugar babies because it makes the whole thing feel less taboo, maybe more socially acceptable or palatable to enter into.
But that denial, that reframing as purely a gift, it seems like it could have a downside too, right? Does it stop sugar babies from maybe fully recognizing the emotional labor or even the physical risk that might be involved?
That's a critical point raised in the analysis. By focusing solely on the gift or relationship aspect, it potentially obscures the work, the effort, and the risks that can be part of these arrangements. It might prevent a full accounting of what's actually being exchanged.
And the sugar daddies,
What?
they benefit from this narrative too, presumably.
Absolutely. It allows them to sidestep feeling like a John, someone just paying for sex. Instead, they can frame themselves as generous benefactors, as gallant even. There was that really blunt quote from a sugar baby that captured it so well. They don't want you to be a sex worker. They just want to pay you for sex.
Wow. It says it all, doesn't it?
It really does. That denial, that specific framing, it works to maintain a more comfortable self-perception for both parties involved, often.
So this brings us back to the IRS and their seeming reluctance to just lay down the law here. If income from prostitution is already taxable, why the hesitation to issue really clear, explicit guidance on sugaring? It feels like it should be simpler.
It feels like it should, but it's actually incredibly complex, and that's likely why they've hesitated. Think about it.
Yep.
How would you even begin to assign a fair market value to non-monetary things like companionship, or to sexual services within what might also contain elements of a genuine relationship?
Right, and if you start trying to tax that, where does it stop? Do you start looking at allowances given in traditional marriages or gifts between unmarried partners?
Exactly. The tax code has generally steered clear of trying to quantify and tax the value exchanged within intimate, non-marital relationships. It's different for marriage, where there are explicit tax rules and benefits. Trying to enforce strict income rules in sugaring could open a huge can of worms, leading to really awkward, intrusive, and maybe ethically questionable inquiries into the nature of all kinds of personal relationships.
So imposing strict tax rules isn't just practically difficult, it could also have some really weird and maybe undesirable social consequences.
Precisely. And think about the potential economic hardship, too, especially for lower-income individuals trying to value and pay taxes on this kind of intimate labor. From a behavioral economic standpoint, it could seriously distort personal decisions about relationships, time, and bodies. So for all these reasons, maybe maintaining this murky gray area is, as one analysis put it, perhaps an appropriate compromise. The tax system just isn't equipped, and maybe shouldn't be equipped, to account for every single aspect of complex human behavior. Ultimately, all this tax talk surrounding sugar relationships, it's like a window into a much deeper societal discomfort. Discomfort with intimacy that involves money, and the persistent, powerful stigma that still surrounds sex work in almost any form.
So yeah, what started as "what's a splendid daddy" really unfolds into this incredible intersection of economics, personal relationships, social norms, and even the fundamental definition of what constitutes work. We've seen how these sugar relationships, especially the Splenda variety, have to navigate this really complex terrain of expectations, money realities, tax confusion, all while bumping up against these deep-seated social taboos.
It definitely gives you a lot to think about. And it leaves us with, perhaps, a final provocative thought for you to consider. If bringing clarity to tax law could, potentially, help destigmatize certain forms of labor or exchange, what other areas of human interaction, things maybe currently kept in the shadows or viewed uncomfortably, might actually benefit from being brought into the light? Recognized, perhaps, for the work or value they represent, even if it makes us uneasy.
That's a great question to ponder. We would genuinely love to hear your thoughts on all of this. What parts of the sugar relationship discussion or the tax stuff surprised you the most? How do you tend to view these arrangements more like gifts or more like a form of work? Let us know what you think down in the comments.
Yeah, please do. And if you found this exploration interesting and you want more discussions digging into fascinating topics like this, please hit the like button on this episode and definitely subscribe to the r/SilverCrowEZula YouTube channel. Your support really does help us keep unpacking these kinds of complex subjects for you.